for being thanks for being a part this morning. We're going to go ahead and start right at 11. We know that people will probably continue to jump on. I want to do a bit of housekeeping first and just say first, thanks for joining us this morning. This is episode 4 of what we've been calling Accelerate Out of the Curve. And the idea is to say, how can we help get information that's timely and helpful into the hands of partners and people that we work with, both at Center for Professional Development and just people in our community who are in need of just like how to help navigate all of this. So this morning, if you would, a couple things for us. If you would, number one, please keep your mic muted. That will help us tremendously. And then secondly, if you have any questions, go ahead and privately chat Adam Cuneo right up there. On my screen, he's in the top corner. Go ahead and just chat him. And periodically, I'm going to ask him if any questions have come in. Because for us, the real idea behind this is practical tools. We want to give you practical tools that are going to be helpful for you as you navigate this new sense of normal that we're all navigating. So this morning you're going to hear from Ron Price and from Paul Bentley. Paul Bentley is the director at the Center for Professional Development. He will be joining us about halfway through because he actually is on another call right now doing something with the Idaho Department of Land. So he'll be back with us about halfway through. But you will get to hear this morning from Ron Price, and I'll let Ron introduce himself in just a moment. But to give you some background as kind of where we landed with this webinar this time, we had a focus group pretty early on, made up of about 15 or 18 folks from different businesses throughout our community. And we asked them what would be helpful. And interestingly enough, in week 2 of stay-at-home orders and all of that, many people said, we don't know what would be helpful because we're still trying to figure out this sense of normal and what this is going to look like as we navigate through. However, we continued to hear it might be helpful for us to learn from leaders who have maybe walked through something like this or who have really been able to practice resiliency in their own places of work and in their own leadership. And so that's one of the reasons why we asked Ron Price to join us this morning. And so I'm going to just kick it off with Ron asking you, would you tell us a little bit about your background in leadership and in leadership development?
Sure, Jeremy, I'd be happy to. And I'm glad to be with you today and to be able to participate in this conversation with everybody who's online. I've been involved in some kind of a leadership role now for, I think actually next year will be my 50th year. So one thing that tells you is that I'm getting pretty old. I've had the opportunity to be in a leadership role in 10 or 12 different organizations during that time. And after running an international business from 1989 to 2000, I retired, did a couple other things, and then started Price Associates in 2004. So I was actually in transition when the first really big disruption that I remember in my business career happened, which was 9/11. I was in Coeur d'Alene that morning, and our world changed overnight because of what happened then. And then we had some time to sort of get our bearings and create a new reality, a new normal. And then we had the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And now we're in this place. So for people who've been in leadership roles for the period of time that I've been, these are the 2 big disruptions that we've been through. And they get us to reflect back on, well, what did I do last time? What was going on back then? So Price Associates, we help leaders. We really see it as our mission is to help leaders become the greatest version of themselves and have a big impact in their organizations and their communities. So I guess that's a brief overview.
Good. And you've been working as a leader, but then also tell me a little bit about the leadership development piece that you do.
Well, ever since the beginning of Price Associates, we've done a lot of executive coaching, but we began to recognize it was probably around 2010, 2011 that I really started to focus on this big shift that was taking place demographically and with globalization and with the increasing complexity that was going to create this need to grow leaders in different ways, to develop leaders faster, broader, with a greater set of skills. And so we looked at the data around that globally for a few years and eventually started a program in 2014, which came to be called the Complete Leader Program. And it works like an EMBA, where we take a group of 12 to 20 people through a 14-month experience where they're getting to know themselves better, developing skills in how they think and how they get things done, how they relate to others. And it's expanded beyond that to be more of an ecosystem of resources that people can access to help them on their journey of becoming a complete leader.
Great, great. So then as a leader, Ron, you alluded to earlier that you walked through some kind of big disruptions in your time in leadership. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in the midst of those big disruptions? And actually, as you're thinking about it, also kind of keep in mind, what are you learning now, even as you're thinking about where we are in 2020?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first things that I've learned, and I get to learn it all over again now because we keep learning. I think as long as we're breathing, we're not finished with that process. But one of the big things was I had to figure out how to balance what was happening outside and maintaining a reasonably good understanding of what was happening outside against what was happening that was my reality, that was specific to me. So in 2008, 2009, we lost half of our business within a period of 2 or 3 months. And it was because clients that we were working with were dramatically impacted by the Great Recession. I remember one of our clients was a big commercial construction company. And when that recession hit, it was a financial crisis primarily, and money just dried up and they couldn't do projects. And it wasn't just commercial, it was residential. And so the impact for us wasn't direct, it was indirect because of the way it was impacting our clients. And each day I had to get up and I had to think about, how do I stay in touch with what's happening at the national level so that I'm not ignorant, but not let it influence me too much and I had to be careful that I didn't let it redefine what my own reality was. So I had to keep coming back to, so how is this impacting me directly, and what kind of control do I have with that? And in a lot of ways, that's happening now as well, because we hear these new statistics. Just before joining you, I got off a call with somebody that I'm coaching in Brazil. And yesterday they had 1,200 deaths in Brazil, and it's continuing to climb. And those are things that disrupt your thinking. Those are things that make you worry. They can give you fears. They can make you wonder, is this totally out of control? And I have to stay in tune with what's happening externally, but then I got to come back and say, but really, what's the impact on me right now today? And what's within my control today that I can work on? So that's one of the big things that I learned back during the Great Recession, and it got me through it, was the balance between those two. And I'm learning it again right now. And it's sort of a silly metaphor, Jeremy, but I sort of think of it like a balloon. For a balloon to really do its job, there's got to be external pressure. That's the atmosphere. Then there's got to be internal pressure. That's our values and our mission and how we approach things. And it's the relationship between the external and the internal that helps the balloon keep its shape. So it's kind of a crazy metaphor, but I'm trying to be a balloon that keeps its shape.
Good. So when you think about that balloon analogy, actually is a great analogy. What virtues did you develop from adversity? And then also likewise, what virtues did your company culture develop?
Well, it goes back to one of our recent books, and I don't mean this as a promotion for our book, but this book has just been so real to me. I'm going back into it again and learning new lessons from it. And the title of the book is Growing Influence. It's a business fable that takes place in Boise. And in the book, one of the models that we teach is this idea that there are 3 different circles of influence for us to manage. The first one is our circle of control. It's what can I control myself? What can I take 100% responsibility for? And one of the big important virtues for me, and that I share with a lot of our clients right now, is make sure that you're thinking about growing that circle of control. So in my particular instance, it's unique for everybody, but in my particular instance, it's how am I getting good sleep? Have I got good diet and exercise? Am I staying hydrated? And how am I taking care of myself emotionally and intellectually and spiritually? And it's really, my circle of control is actually in my calendar. It's the first 2 hours of each day. I'm an early riser and we don't have children at home, so I have a lot of freedom that maybe other people don't have. But from 5 to 7 each morning, I focus on what can I do to become stronger myself? Because as I enter the day, I can only help others to the extent that I've built my own strength. So it starts with self-care. So it's the routines, it's what I invest in during those first 2 hours. And then I've actually, during this time, I've made the last 2 hours of each day important also. And a lot of that's how I interact with my wife and how we finish the day. And do we finish the day by focusing on things that are virtuous and admirable and noble, or do we finish the day by wringing our hands over all the news reports? So it's the first 2 hours and the last 2 hours are how I think of managing that circle of control. The second circle that we write about the book is what we call the circle of collaboration. And that's about where is it that we have a similar interest as somebody else might have. Maybe we have similar values as somebody else. Are there ways that we could work together to create results that I can't do by myself? And that really is where our team comes into play. But it's also our clients and it's friends. It's members of the community. How can we work on projects together that are going to be beneficial, that will be impactful? And it may be charitable work that we do. It may be how we spend our money in charitable work. It might be how we develop new ways of delivering value to customers. It's anything where we're working together. And what I love about it is if we have shared interest and shared values, but we all have a little different perspective, that adds a lot of richness to what we can provide, because we're using our minds together to be more creative and to expand our thinking of what's possible. And even in a tough time like this, there are so many ways that you can think about creating value. And one of the things I've learned is not to think about how are we going to create value 3 years from now. How can we create value this month? What can we do that's going to help people this month, believing that that's going to lead us to the next? And then just to finish up this model, the last circle is the circle of concern. The things that we worry about or that frustrate us, but they seem to be outside of our control or our influence. And the big thing there is to make sure that we don't fill our minds with too much of that where it steals our energy to work in the other two circles. So I think of trying to keep the volume down on my circle of concern. The biggest way I keep the volume down is by not giving in to the temptation to always be watching the latest news report and the latest political fight and all that, but just not let that take up too much of my day, to be very judicious about how much of that I expose myself to. So that model has really proven to be valuable. It's a simple model, but it's proven to be very valuable for me going through this time. And I realized that, well, without having defined it, it's pretty much the same way I handled the Great Recession.
Interesting. So, Ron, maybe just as a tool for those that are listening, for their business, for themselves personally, maybe it's so walk us through that one more time. So, what if we had to just draw? If you have something, just draw these three circles, and the first one is.
So the innermost circle is your circle of control. It's what can I control 100%. Now I have to have focus and discipline to do that. So nobody can do that but me. I have to build good habits around that. And I always encourage people, don't try to transform yourself overnight. Just pick one easy habit and start practicing it, and then build one more. Keep it easy. Don't make it too hard, because the biggest reason why we give up is because we made things too hard. So your circle of control is, what are the habits I can build that give me more personal power? And I like to think that I'm filling up my bank account so that when I start working with other people, I'll have something to invest.
Yeah, that's good. Well, one of the reasons I asked that is because the first time that I did this, it was pretty eye-opening to just think about what can I put in that circle, because I drew the circle. What can I put in that circle that I can control 100%? And then the next circle is collaborate.
Yeah, your circle of collaboration. And this is where you have similar interests as other people. So by working together, you can get things done that you couldn't do by yourself. In the book Growing Influence, we refer to this as building virtuous conspiracies. So you don't have to announce it to the world. You just find somebody else who has a similar interest as you. It's good when you have similar values because that gives you more sustainability, more staying power. And how can we collaborate? How can we work together? And when you figure out how to do that, and again, don't try to make it real tough. Start with easy things and build your capacity over time. So that's your second circle. And those two circles are where we have the opportunity, even in this time, to build a lot of influence. And then, of course, I say that the circle of control is in the middle because that's your greatest source of power. Then the circle of collaboration is bigger than that, and the circle of control is contained in it. And then the largest circle of all is the circle of concern. And these are the things that frustrate us or worry us, but we don't see how we can have a direct impact on them. And they're there. And sometimes I say we don't see how we can impact them because it's invisible to us. We might actually discover it later. But for today, it seems like it's more draining me than giving me something I can actually work on. And those are the things where we have to learn how to not let them take up too much of our mind space.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to turn down the volume. And that's a conscious decision, right? To be able to turn down that volume. And
it sure is. And sometimes it means we have to break a habit that has not been serving us well.
Yeah.
So some of us automatically go to wanting to read what's on Twitter, or we want to read what our favorite media outlet has, or things like that. And it may feed our confirmation bias. It might, whatever we think is right or wrong about the world today, it might make us feel better about it. But the truth is it helping you, or is it stealing energy? And what I've noticed about myself is if I give myself too much time in that space, I feel weaker. I feel more discouraged. I don't feel empowered. So I have to control that.
Good. Thank you. I thought it was helpful for me, and maybe it was helpful for others that are listening, to draw those three circles and to fill those in, just to write those things down. For me, it was the first time I was able to step back and look and say, okay, this is what I can control. And oh, look, here are some areas of collaboration. And that opened up for me opportunities to collaborate across departments at the university, and even, with Price Associates in Boise State. Like, some of those collaborations came out through just writing it down and acknowledging it. And then I think that the big aha for me with that was how much was in my circle of concern that I had to learn how to figure out how to turn the volume down on.
Yeah. And I heard you share a phrase recently, Jeremy, that really stuck with me. You said that you're focused on building bridges instead of silos.
Yeah.
I thought that's really a great visual to think about how we collaborate. I think there's so many things in your circle of control that you could zero in on right now. One that we've done is we've said, okay, we're in a disrupted situation business-wise. This time our business has dropped. It's probably going to drop at least 50% this year again. But does that change our mission? And we decide, no, our mission hasn't changed. We still believe in our mission just as much. Does it change our values of how we want to do our work? Now, what exactly we do is changing, but how we go about it, our values are that we want to help people have more clarity, and we want to help people learn how to collaborate and how to really have a big impact. That hasn't changed. So that's in our circle of control, is that we can continue to think about how do we develop new ways of advancing our mission and our values, even though the tactics are changing. Another thing that's inside your circle of control, if you're a business owner, is you can be very, very realistic about what's going on financially right now. So we took a very hard look at what's coming in and what's going out, and where can we save money? Where can we tighten our belt? Where might we be able to generate new kinds of revenue? All of those are things that you can build inside your circle of control, but you have to get down in the weeds, so to speak, to do that. You've got to really pay attention to the details. And we made it one of our clear goals is that we're going to keep putting people first, that we believe in the long run, our survival as an organization is based on how we value people. So these are all things that we can build into our circle of control, and we can expand through our circle of collaboration.
Yeah. And I think what's so great about that is this is exactly why Center for Professional Development, Boise State, has done these webinars. And so it's a perfect example of a collaboration as well, is people first, and wanting to make sure that people get tools that are going to be helpful for them and necessary for them to keep moving forward and accelerate out of the curve in that way. As a reminder, if you have any questions at anything we're talking about, send them specifically privately to Adam Cuneo, and he'll let us know. Adam, has anything come in at this point? Any questions yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so please feel free to any questions you might have, anything you want some clarity on. Ron, how do kind of pivoting just a little bit, but how do hardships shape an individual, and then how do hardships shape an organization, just through experiences that you've seen?
Well, let's start with an individual. A lot of it is not the hardship itself, but how you choose to respond to it. One of the great authors on this topic, Viktor Frankl, wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and he was a concentration camp survivor. And he in the book, he explains the one endowment that we have as human beings is that no matter what happens to us, we still have the ability to choose how we respond to it. He eventually, when he was freed from the concentration camp and he became a psychologist/philosopher, he developed a therapy called logotherapy, which was around this idea that a very strong sense of purpose is one of the greatest ways that you can survive difficult times or hardships. So we can choose that, or unfortunately, sometimes people choose the other route. My daughter for a few years was working with homeless people on the streets, and that was her full-time job. And one of the things that I really admired about her was that she knew those people not as homeless people, she knew them as human beings. And she knew their stories. So when I would walk the streets with her, she would begin to tell me their stories. And oftentimes these people had endured hardships, and they chose to really become outside of the system. I remember one fellow she told me about, he'd owned a construction business. His wife developed cancer, and they didn't have the right kind of health insurance. And she eventually died, and he ended up with so many debts because of all of his healthcare bills that he decided the only way he was going to survive was to leave society. So he disappeared from society, became homeless, and that way he didn't have to pay the IRS, or he didn't have to pay the medical bills and things. Well, he chose to deal with the hardship in a way that we would say ruined his life. So it's not automatic that we're going to choose the right path. So I like to say that hardship is either going to make us better or bitter. So it's either going to help us to develop our character and figure out how to be a better version of ourselves, or it could, if we respond to it the wrong way, it could ruin us. And that's a choice that we have to make. And I think that most people who are human beings are tempted with those two choices. I think there are times when we say, should I give up? And I want to encourage people that it doesn't matter how tough things get, how hard they are, we know that there's the possibility of choosing that path that makes you better and creates new opportunities for you in the future. I will say during the Great Recession, we had to make a lot of adjustments. It was not an easy time. There were a lot of times then when I was just thinking about, okay, how do we make this a good week? I don't know what next year's going to look like, but how do we make this a good week? My mom, when I was 10 years old, my folks split up back in 1963, and my mom went out and got a job, a minimum wage job, to take care of her 3 sons. And I remember her going into her room when she got home from work, and I'd hear her in there crying and begging God to take her life. And it wasn't a spiritual prayer, it was suicidal. And I'm a 10-year-old listening to my mom go through this. And then after a while, she'd dry the tears, she'd get up and fix dinner. And she taught me sometimes all you can do is survive one day. But that hardship for my mom really shaped her. She would tell you, she passed away in 1996, but she would have told you that it made her a better person because she didn't give up. And it took her a long time to figure out how to be a better person. But she taught me a lot about resilience then, and she taught me that resilience sometimes is just for the next day. Sometimes it's for the next hour. But if you keep on, eventually that hardship shapes you or forges you into being a better person. And it's really based on how you choose to keep going and how you choose to look for your own new future, a better future. One of our colleagues, Evans Baya, has a talk he gives that I really love. He said, it's how to create a beautiful future. And even in the toughest of times, you can ask that question, how might I create a beautiful future? And it's surviving today and looking for a better tomorrow, I think, is what makes those hardships as an individual get better. Now, as a company or as an organization, it's the same thing, but now you're doing it in the context of collaboration instead of just your own personal choices. Now it's the organization making good choices. And I think it's especially important then to pull together, to not attack each other, to not suddenly become suspicious of each other, but to say, no, 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 we're in this together and we need to work together in order to find a way out, because together we have a lot more power.
That's good. Thank you. That's important. And I know I've been really thinking about how do we encourage our employees and our team now in a time like this. We went from initially, things were changing so fast, and I think probably everybody on this webinar today, you're in the same place where the information was coming so fast. We were closing our offices, we're closing things, and then we're at home, and how long are we going to be at home? And so then this wrestling match of like, okay, I'm leading people. How do I encourage my team? What do I say? What does that look like? And what are the steps that I can take in that process? And so when you think about that, and Paul just joined us, so Paul, good to see you. You're muted right now, so don't forget to unmute yourself. But what steps? And then Paul, I'll ask you this question as well, since you're both on now. What steps would you say are important to take during this time to encourage your team, to make sure your team stays connected? So Ron, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I give people permission to have a lousy day. I say, it's okay for you to have a terrible day. And my first job in engaging with anybody on our team is to listen. And if somebody on our team wants to tell me that they're feeling lousy, I'm not going to preach at them. I'm not going to tell them you shouldn't be feeling lousy. I'm not going to share everything we just talked about. I'm going to step into how they're feeling. I'm going to step into their experience, because that's the first thing that they want, is somebody who can understand what they're feeling right now, what they're experiencing. So we start there. And then I want to, having listened and given them the opportunity to process that, I want to help them think through the power they have to choose what's next. So I'm not going to give them advice. I'm going to ask questions and help them think about who they are and where they have the power to make choices and what choices they want to make, and to let them know that I'm going to support them as they go through that. So great. I'm sure Paul's going to have something much wiser, but that's the stuff I come up with.
I just landed in my head here, so I may have to ask, Gary, could you just kind of repeat the question? That might
help. Well, first, Paul, I was actually thinking about you when this question came across. So the idea is what we've been talking about right now up to this point, is the idea of, so how do we endure hardships? What does that look like for us personally, individually? And then also, how do we help our team kind of navigate through that? And so I was thinking actually about those emails that you've been sending out to our team, and how those have been, received. So talk a little bit about that, if you would, just about kind of what that's been for you, because I think it's also been a little cathartic for you to do that as well as a leader.
Right. So I'm an early riser, and my morning usually starts like this. I kind of half awake, and I'll get some crazy idea in my mind and think, why am I thinking that? And that turns into an idea for an email to the team for some reason. Lately it's been about COVID, but and not so much about the pandemic, but just how we're reacting to that. So I sent out a little email, and it's some topic. I think the last one I sent out was 66 days down, 50 to go, based on Boise State's schedule, and just visited a little about what is that next 50 days going to look like. So I like to engage that way, and then always making sure that people, I don't require people to respond. I don't require them to read it, but it's nice when they do. But I like to hear back from the team what they're thinking. And that I think connects us. We do another thing. We just did it yesterday. This one's harder for me because I just get so caught up in what I'm doing in the moment, which is the biggest danger, I think, of this whole Zoom life that we've entered into. And that is to just have casual lunch together. We everybody brings their lunch. We talk about what we're eating. We just take a little bit of time to do that. And we just make it in the middle of the day. Not everybody can make it every time, but most everybody has been there. And I think everybody at some point is connected. And I think, so that's kind of a soft side of it, just having some relational time to find out. And in the rule, I say rule, the suggestion is that we don't talk about work. A lot of times we end up saying, what's your schedule look like, and those kinds of things. But so just engaging them to think maybe not just about their job. We can deal with those kinds of things. We can look at each other's calendars. We can look at the task and the assignments. But I think that staying engaged, so there's two things. So this interactive email talking about what's going on and how are you responding to it? How's it affecting the way you do business? The soft side of it, having lunch. But the other one that we do, and I appreciate so much our Lori, who is in charge of our operations. Lori runs these meetings. I don't, but we have a weekly meeting on Mondays, and it's a hard and fast 90-minute meeting where we do lots of hard work in that meeting, and we have not let that go. In fact, we've kind of doubled down on what we do in those meetings to talk about what are the big, we call them our rocks, what are the big things we need to move forward in the next week. So I think by doing those three things, and also I try to at least once a day have some kind of phone contact with each team member. It doesn't always work, but when I can, I like to do that. So those are just the things I like doing.
That's great. So Paul, for those that might not know you on the call, tell us just a little bit about you and your role at Boise State.
So I am the director for the Center for Professional Development, which is the group that's hosting this today, and that's my role. And I just got off of a really fun call. One of our state agencies, we work with. We have a leader program for them, and they have a huge capstone project that they're accountable to report out on to a group of people. And I just got off doing that. So that's the kind of stuff I like to do when I'm not just working in the leadership role. I really like to also teach.
Great, thanks. So just a reminder one more time, if you have any questions, send them to Adam Cuneo just in a private chat, and we'll address some of those. Let's turn our attention now to a question that we got a lot of as we kind of threw this out for people. Prior to COVID-19, did you guys have a strategic plan or process in place to navigate hardships? Not to navigate COVID-19, because we all know that we didn't have that plan in place, but did you have a strategic plan in place to kind of navigate through hardships? So I'll let either of you decide who wants to go first, Ron or Paul.
Ron, you go first.
All right, great. Well, so I have to break that question into two parts. Did we have a strategic plan in place? Yes, we did. To navigate hardship, we're a little bit unusual in that our company does not have a headquarters. We have people who work with us who are in different states, and for a lot of our programs, people who are in different countries. And so we've been connecting virtually for quite some time already. That was not something new for us. So what would typically be a disaster or emergency recovery plan, such as setting up communications and technology and all those things, we didn't have to do any of that because it was already there. The thing that has disrupted us is that we all do a fair amount of traveling, and all of a sudden that travel just shut down completely. And so then it became, our plan really was, what did our clients want? How are we going to adapt to our clients? And some of them they immediately said, hey, we want to just switch over to virtual. So we started delivering a lot of the things that we would have done in person over Zoom or other virtual platforms. And then there were some of them that just said, you know, we want to put it all on hold until we can be face to face again in person. So for us, it's been our plan for adapting has really been about what do our clients want and how do we adapt to our clients. Internally, there's very, very little adapting that we've had to do this time. Now, we don't really have, I'm trying to think of what could disrupt us completely. And if, say, for instance, the internet shut down and there was no more internet, right now we don't have a plan for how to recover from that. So it's a good question that I probably need to give some thought to. Maybe we should be raising some carrier pigeons or something. I'm not sure.
Perfect. Paul, what about you?
Well, we have done what's called scenario planning in the past, just talking about, you know, the what ifs. You know, Robert Greenleaf, the author of and kind of the leader of the servant leader movement, he talks about the servant leader characteristic of foresight, and that it has ethical implications. That if a leader's not looking ahead, that they're making an ethical error in their leadership, and but nobody can see this, right? So we had talked about the need to go online, for example. We were looking at different things, but I think more important, the thing that's probably helping us through this time is, and I think it would help regardless of the situation, we have a really, really tight relational culture where we are very open about who we are. We have three values that we live and die by. We have a mission that we absolutely believe in. And what we're discovering is those things can never change. Tactics change all the time. I mean, all of a sudden going to online, and are we there? No, man, we're learning as we go. And I don't think I'm even learning fast enough as we go to adapt to this. But I think the key has been that we had a foundation to build off of that was going to help us no matter what. So all of a sudden, you know, I don't know if you call it a mission statement. Our purpose is to help you become the best version, or to help you make your world a better place to live, work, and do business. Thanks. I have 4 folks from the team on the conversation, so they're probably all rolling over and rolling their eyes. But that didn't change. We're still here to help you do a better job with your business. It's just how we're doing that, and that has been the biggest adjustment. And we revisit this time and time again. What is our vision? What is our 2-year strategy, 3-year strategy? And we realize as we hit this pandemic, there was one whole section of our plan that blew apart, and that was our kind of a tactical strategy. But the part that didn't blow apart, the part that we grounded in, was our commitment to our values and our purpose.
That's good. So we've had a question come in, and I think it's a good one. I'm anxious to hear both of your thoughts on this. So with fear and in some organizations, furloughs, that's happening in some organizations. So how do you move forward when some of that is out of your control? How do you move forward when some of that is out of your control?
Paul, do you want to start or you want me to?
I'll take a stab at it. So I compartmentalize. I can't think about that because I guess the way I look at it is in fact, Adam shared this story with me. Adam who's answering the questions today. He told the story about Cortez getting ready to go on the island. I think it was the island of doesn't matter, but ultimately he had a ship load of people who were afraid to go into this island, and so he had everybody get off on shore and then burn the ship, so they had to go forward. And Adam said sometimes we need to burn the ships, and I think when you have a compelling mission or purpose, you have to just focus on that. You can't let the other things distract. Now, I think the hardest thing for me and maybe for our team is when you're told that you're going to go on furlough, for example. We can't work those days. We're not supposed to work. And that's really, really hard because we can't control that. So our response has been, I hope, to kind of comply by the rules, but keep our focus on where we're going, not letting up on that. That kind of keeps us inspired enough to keep going. fear can paralyze us. It causes you to freeze, flee, or fight. And I think we're learning that we're allowing that fear to kind of catapult us into where we're going to be next. So.
Yeah, for me, thank you, Paul. For me, I think that we have to go back and think about what are the things that I can control. So I can't control if I'm going to get furloughed or if I've been furloughed. I probably can. I guess even that's a question that you have to ask. Is there a way I can influence that? Is there some way that you can demonstrate value that you're creating for your organization that would make it silly for them to furlough you or foolish for them? But let's assume you can't. What can you control? Well, you automatically can think about, how do I control my expenses? How do I lengthen the runway, so to speak? And so you think about where you can cut back. And as Americans, it's amazing how many opportunities we have to streamline things. There's so many things that we think we need that when push comes to shove, we can probably do without them. So you think about that. You think about how you can serve. You think about, how can I become more valuable in the future? What could I be working on myself that would make it bad business for somebody to furlough me in the future? And so that may be going back to school. I know that in most recessions, it actually increases the number of people who are going back to school. So whether it's the Center for Professional Development or it's working on a degree, that for a lot of people, this is the opportunity for them to up their game and increase their skills. And today, there's no excuse for us not to keep learning. We have access to so much information. I betray my age when I say that when I was working on papers, when I was in school, you had to go to something called a library. There was no Barnes and Noble back then even. You had to understand the Dewey Decimal System and things like that. Today, we have so much access to information that whether you're doing it through a formal institution or you're doing it on your own, there's no excuse for us to not increase our value in some way. So you think about, who am I and what do I enjoy and where can I create value and how would I like to become more adept, or how would I like to become more valuable in the future? And I do think that if you look out 6, 12, 18 months here, one of the things that's going to happen is that we're going to see an increase in the size of what's referred to as the gig economy. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, one of the problems I think our clients are going to have, that I'm thinking about how do we help them solve it, is that we're going to see where more and more people say, actually, I want to work for you, but I don't want to be an employee. I want to do it on my terms. And there are going to be some very talented people that can contribute in very significant ways that tell us that. And are we just going to turn our back to them and say, no, I'm only going to hire employees that I can control? Or are we going to look for new ways to lead where we can create a much bigger impact if we're open to this idea of tapping into that gig economy? So I think with somebody who feels that they don't have the control over whether they're going to be furloughed or laid off, yeah, it's okay to agonize over that. It's okay to grieve it, but don't stay there. Yeah. Because that doesn't take away your choices for what you can do going forward. And you've got so many different directions that you could go. And this is where talking to the people that you're close to, the people who care about you, they can probably give you some good advice. They can probably reinforce what your potential is and help to build up your courage so that you'll do something that in the long run is going to put you in a better place than you've ever been before. And that's really the objective. No matter what hardship you go through, the objective is to find the benefit on the other side of that that's going to take you further than you were before the hardship overtook you.
Ron, I really appreciate what you're saying. And as a business owner on your end, the stress is going to be crazy for trying to figure that out. And yet I think what you're saying is exactly true. I would say this, that is also true of an employee. I think I made some mistakes. And Jeremy, I don't know if you've asked a question about this or not, but my contribution to this was in 2008, I did it wrong. And I was a part of a university with a brand new startup department, and I made some big mistakes. And one of those is I disconnected. I went out and did the Lone Ranger thing within the department. It didn't stay connected to the values of that. So when 2008 happened, I woke up and thought, man, they're going to close my department down. Well, the reason is I was seeing myself as kind of an employee, and I was an employee. But here's what I was going to suggest. You have to start thinking of yourself as an independent contractor on one end, even if you're an employee, you know, where you are a gig worker, where you are validating your worth to that organization. That's what's going to help you get through that. At the same time, it's never been more important to stay connected to the team and the people you're with. And if you don't mind, Jeremy, I wrote down 3 things I wish I had done differently.
Do it. Yeah, sure.
My past. So I woke up in 2008 when this thing hit. NPR radio was on my alarm, and when I woke up and the alarm clock went off and they announced this big catastrophe, I turned to my wife and said, I'll be out of a job in 6 months. And sure enough, the university I was a part of, they took all local budgeted programs and cut them within 6 months. I think I could have made an argument to stay alive, but I was shocked. I hadn't really thought about what was going on, and we were new. But the first thing I would have done is I would have made sure that when I started the job, I shared that they shared the same values I had, and I shared their values. Because what happened is I shared this vision and this mission of what I wanted to see happen that they asked me to take charge of, but I'm not sure that they did. I think they saw it more as an experiment that we could cut if it doesn't work. The second one was not to be a lone ranger, that I needed to stay connected, and I'm learning this. And my boss, Pete Reese, who is associate dean, helps me see this. He goes, "You are Boise State, and Boise State is you." So never ever has it been more important to stay connected and supportive of the people who are paying you and the people who you are collaborating with, that you are this inseparable resource for them. So I think that's the other one. But then the third one personally was to make myself more valuable, to see myself as a gig worker within a system where I am proving and validating my worth and our team's worth every day to the university.
That's good. That's good. So Ron, let me ask you that same question, since Paul kind of led into it a little bit. Do you have any regrets for or lessons learned maybe from 2008 and what you walked through as a leader?
Yeah, well, I'm going to betray to our audience that you had sent that question in advance and got me thinking about it. I thought, wow, what a great question to contemplate. And I don't say it, I think I'm just fortunate. I have to say there isn't anything I did during that time that I regret. So what was it that I did that I don't regret? Well, one thing is, and I've done it again this time, we serve at the pleasure of our clients. They can decide to fire us at a moment's notice for any reason, and they don't need to explain it to us. And we don't have any labor laws protecting us or anything. So what happened in 2008 and 2009, and I see happening again, is that not all of our clients were going through the same thing. So yeah, we lost about half of our business, but you could also say that means we kept half of our business, that they still had needs. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that we were gracious to those that we lost. I remember one CEO sitting me down in his office, and he said, "Ron, I've got a choice to make." He said, "I could lay off X number of employees and keep paying you as my consultant and as my coach, or I could tell you that I'm going to finish our professional relationship and keep those people employed." And I said, "Well, I don't see that you have much of a decision to make. There's no reason. You hold on to your employees. That's okay." And we've stayed friends ever since then. And even with this, I reached out to him. I don't know how long ago it was that we sent our last invoice to him. But I continue to reach out to him because he's a friend. He's not just a customer, he's a friend. And it's okay. That was his reality. That's what he had to deal with. But I said to myself, okay, if we're losing customers, that means there's somebody else out there who needs us. So I need to go find them. So I think what Paul said about staying connected is really important. And it's staying connected in the associations or the groups that you're a part of, but it's also staying connected individually. just reaching out to people saying, hey, how are you doing? What's happening here? And valuing them as a person before you value them as a customer. So in 2008, 2009, it actually opened the door to us to expand our business quite a bit into new spaces that we'd never been before. We would have never thought of that. We would have never considered it because we were plenty busy before the downturn. And the same thing's happening now. It's making us ask, well, so who's out there that isn't being impacted negatively by this downturn? You know, believe it or not, there are organizations and businesses that are growing like crazy right now. Let's just take, for an example, what we're using today, Zoom. You know, before the shelter in place, Zoom was having 10 million people visit their site every day. The last statistic I heard is now they have 200 million people visiting it every day. And that was a month ago. So it may be up to 400 million now. I don't know. But I'm thinking, wow, what does that mean? What are they going through? They must be hiring like crazy. They must be having operational challenges like crazy. So it's not just thinking about this affecting people in a negative way. So I took a look at all of my currently active clients that I'm personally involved with. And over half of them, their revenue has not been impacted at all by COVID-19. They had to change how they did business because they're shelter in place. And we've looked for ways that we can support them in that. And so we're doing a lot more virtual coaching. We're making tools available to them. But this idea that you can always find somebody who's looking for what you have to offer, and you can always increase the value that you bring to people. So, you know, I'm almost a little bit embarrassed to say it, Jeremy, but somehow we figured out not to do things that we would regret later back in 2008, 2009. And those are reminders to me not to do anything stupid today.
That's a great piece of advice. Don't do stupid things, right?
Yeah. One of our slogans for our people is show up and do good work.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
There's not more we can do than that. Show up and do good work.
Yeah, that's good. Well, another question came across, and I'll be curious to hear how you guys answer this one. What is the organization's responsibility towards its employees? It might be on the heels of the furlough piece. Yeah. What is the organization's responsibility towards its employees? I know it's a big question, and we have people from all over on this webinar. So,
Ron, I could take a stab at this one from our perspective. It's I think the organization owes the truth. I think, you know, I think you have to be very careful not to try to couch it in terms of, you know, some kind of panacea that's going to work out. But if you know the truth, share the truth. I think people, what is the old death by 1,000 cuts, paper cuts, or, you know, this is apologies, but you're a stab to the gut, you know. Well, I would rather hear the truth. I want to know what's happening, and I want to know that they're making decisions systemically and not just in isolation or not reactively. And I think every organization owes that. I think I owe that to the people that are on our team. I think our team owes that to our clients, to be honest about it. And I'm not going to, you know, you don't air dirty laundry, but you do definitely say, here's where we are, here's what's happening, here are some decisions, and then make sure you're getting feedback from the people who are doing that work before taking massive actions that you can't back out of or backstep later.
Yeah, I think Paul really said it well. Of course, every organization is unique, and they may have legal obligations to their folks. And that might vary based on the kind of relationship that they have with their employees. And there are all kinds of factors there related to benefits, insurance, and all those kinds of things. They certainly have what I would call practical obligations to let people know what's going on. And there I really endorse what Paul's saying about give them the truth. Don't shade the truth. Don't hide things, or sometimes it's inappropriate to talk about certain things because the decision hasn't been made. But the organization's obligation should be to tell as much as they can as soon as they can, within reason and being professional. And then they have a relational commitment to those people as well, to continue to see them as human beings who have families and who have their own concerns. And I think if organizations will think at those three levels, what are my legal or regulatory obligations? What are my practical obligations? What are my human obligations, my relational obligations, that they'll satisfy. Inside of that framework, which is more of a conceptual framework, organizations will respond based on the size of their leadership. And I don't mean how tall they are or how many, I mean the quality of their leadership. I always think every organization grows or contracts to the size of its leadership. And I mean, it's the leadership's capacity to think creatively, the leadership's commitment to character, the leadership's expertise. It's all those things. If you want a really interesting case study in that would be my son, who has a business that's based in Seattle, but they have a large office here in Boise. It's called Gravity Payments. And we have a podcast that we send out called the Complete Leader Podcast. And if you find that on iTunes, I just interviewed him a couple of weeks ago about how they've responded to all this. They have a unique way of doing it. A lot of organizations couldn't have done what they did. But it's very interesting to hear how they tapped into people's creativity and people's commitment and how they came together. And they did some things that are very, very unique for this time. And it'll be interesting to see how they turn out. So if you want a case study in it, you go to iTunes and look for the Complete Leader Podcast. And it's the interview that I did with Dan Price, where we spent 50 minutes or so talking about how they navigated this and how they've held together as a group.
That's good. Well, we have time for one more question, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because both of you have talked a little bit about how you navigated 2008. How do you think where we are right now with the COVID-19 is different from 2008 in regards specifically to its impact on business?
Well, I'll start this time, Paul. One of the big differences is people were still going out to restaurants in 2008, 2009.
True.
As bad as the recession was, the restaurants still did they did okay during that time. They still had a lot of people coming. The extent to which businesses had to close down for a period of time, this time, much more severe. And we don't know exactly how that's all going to come back. There's so many logistical issues that businesses are going to have to rethink and recreate coming out of this. And it goes all the way down to the salons and how they're taking care of people who want to get their hair cut or their nails done. It goes all the way up to global supply chains and how those have been disrupted. So I think that the breadth and depth of disruption this time is much, much greater. You can just look at the difference in the GDP, look at the difference in the unemployment numbers. And we have a much, much bigger set of issues that we have to deal with this time. Hopefully there will be some things that are easier this time. There was a fundamental flaw in our financial structure in 2008, 2009, and it took a long time to get that fixed. The Federal Reserve's commitment to liquidity and making money available to banks is much better predetermined and much better organized this time than it was last time. At least there will be more resources available for us to stand things back up again than there were last time. But I think in that sense, I think that we can't compare the two. They're so different when you get down to the specifics of what happened. But what we can say is similar is we can say that working together and demonstrating solid values and holding true to our mission, like Paul said, those are the things that are going to give us the strength to find the new pathway out and to actually create a better future as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Paul, what are your thoughts as we wrap up?
Just briefly, I think the thing we're maybe hopefully learning this time, in 2008, it was one system that broke, and it affected other systems, somewhat affected the, so our ecosystem is not just business, right? but the business side of broke, and that affected families. And had but we are in an ecosystem this time where we had our health system, not our health care system, but we had an attack on the organic aspect of humanity. And I think what has happened is we try to answer that in isolation without thinking about the like a clock with all the gears, the implications it's had to business, the implication it's had to social structure, the implication it's had even on the environment, the way we look at that. And I think as a business, we've got to be careful, because the business will sit back and say, well, these doctors are making decisions. They don't understand what I'm going through as a business. As a business, we got to be careful not to make actions and accusations and say, well, I'm going to make business decisions and not think of the health implications or the social implications or the relational implications that could be spinning off of my decisions within the same crisis. So I think this is a much bigger systemic issue this time. It has a greater systemic impact than in 2008 by far.
Yeah. Well, we could go on and on, but people have to eat lunch and go about the rest of their day. So Paul and Ron, thank you for your time today, for your wisdom, for just sharing things that you've learned. I know it was really beneficial for me. And for all of you that joined us, thank you for being a part of these webinars and the things that are happening. Keep looking and watching your emails. There'll be some things coming out about future webinars and things. And also some classes that are moving to an online environment. So we appreciate you. Please know that you're not alone. If there's anything that we can do at Boise State Center for Professional Development, please reach out. If you want to know anything more about Ron, you can go to the Price Associates website. You can get to him that way as well. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being a part today. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Ron. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good to be with all of you. Hope this was helpful for all of us.